and it takes a little while.
I'm wondering if I don't even have a coaching culture background, Joel.
I don't either, to be honest. Yeah.
I should get one, like an official coaching culture background, but this is good enough for now. Cool.
I think yours are always appropriate. Yeah.
Oh, I like these ones.
Yeah.
Okay, so, ready to get cracking.
Right. Deer in the headlights. Let's go.
All right, let's go. Okay, right. Welcome to the Future of Employee Experience. I've got Morne from Coaching Culture and Joel from LRMG joining me today. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi, Sally. Thank you for having us. Yeah, this is a great opportunity and treat to be here. Looking forward to the chat.
Absolutely. I love spending time. Both of you are some of my favorite people in the world, so I'm looking forward to chatting a little bit.
Oh, Morne, you're just starting it on such a great note. A little bit of flattery. So then, Morne, I'm gonna start off with you, and I'm gonna ask you to just give me a little bit more about you. So how did you end up at Coaching Culture? Tell me just a little bit highlights of your journey and what you love about employee experience.
Okay, so it's a bit of a strange story. It's an unconventional one because I guess I have an unconventional way of looking at things. I'm not a corporate guy. I tried corporate when I was right in the beginning and decided against it a long time back. And I took an entrepreneurial route to my approach to work. I'm an edtech entrepreneur 5 times over, founder and sort of hands in making a startup work 5 times around the block. But I lived 2 kinds of lives. One of them was in being an entrepreneur and startups, and the other one was in facilitation and coaching. And so I've walked these 2 parallel lives, but both of them were actually strangely about people development. And I think if you had to ask me what the common thread was, it's just I'm a humanist. I believe in people. I love people. I think we're amazing. We've stood on the moon. We're going to give birth to AI. It's like astonishing stuff. This is us, right? And so I've always been really fired up about where people can take it to the next level, because literally everything's achieved by people. We make amazing machines and things, but it's us in the end that make it happen, right?
Yeah.
So if I look over my shoulder, I see a life that's all about people development. I got into touch with Coaching Culture. I actually kicked down their door. I said to them, you have an amazing something here. I got reason to actually use it in a context. I needed to train up a whole bunch of coaches a while back. I was looking around. I couldn't find anything to fulfill that task, not in the way that I wanted to do it. And I came across Coaching Culture, and it's an absolutely fantastic product that is being built as we speak. Every day, something new is being added to it. There's this team in the UK going on a serious development path. And I just saw my own startup journey, and I saw what they're trying to achieve. And the product itself just did amazing things. So I kind of pounded on the door and I said, you don't have a choice. I'm going to do some international business development for you. And that's how I got to know the folks at Coaching Culture. They're a great team, lovely people. And their mission is really to turn managers into leaders. And that's that massive overlap for me was the commonality in our experience, and I'm all for that. So that's my mission too. And I think it's such a privilege to work with partners like Joel in bringing this to the workplace, humanizing the workplace and turning managers into leaders. So that's me. What I like about the employee experience space is that people are paying attention to it, Sally.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at where we came from in the industrialization of our workplaces, that gave rise to Marxism, because how badly people were being treated in the first wave of industrialization. In the modern workplace, the fact that someone's actually defined employee experience, given it a label, and suddenly we're paying attention to it and actually measuring what is the experience of the internal customer, the employee in our organization, right?
Yeah.
And how does that experience impact their whole willingness to contribute and to join our team. That's what I love. It shines a light on this aspect of our work environment. We spend so much time in our work environments. It should be brilliant when we do, and companies are paying attention to it. So it's that piece, that recognition of the humanity in our workplace, that speaks to me on the employee experience side. So before I talk too much longer, I'm just going to hand it over to Joel. I'm going to carry on going if you don't stop me.
Okay, so yeah, slightly different journey to Morne, but started out in IT back in the 90s and found my way into training and development and coaching people, taking people through transformational workshops for a couple of years down in KwaZulu-Natal, and then coming back to IT because I wanted to marry the two together, and ended up in e-learning and learning and development. And I think just like Morne, my passion is about people. I then took a slight segue and a detour into the environmental stuff, and I started a renewable energy company for a couple of years, building making electricity from cow dung and things like that. It was really interesting, making compost. So yeah, there was an interesting segue and an interesting journey out that way, but came back to my passion of developing people and back into this world. And then yeah, from a coaching culture perspective, when Morne was training up coaches, I put up my hand to be trained as a coach because, hey, Morne is putting up his hand. I mean, I don't care what it is, I'm there, you know. And because it's how I met Morne, was through his facilitation work back almost 20 years ago. So yeah, there's always been this passion, this commonality between us. And when he said, yeah, I'm training up coaches, it's like, oh, I'm in. And then we said, well, now I'm going to take this to the international market. I've, as you said, knocked on coaching culture's door, banged on their door. More so is probably more accurate. I said, well, you know what? If we're looking for international partners, you know, LRMG, I'm putting up LRMG's hand. I'll ask forgiveness later. Let's go for it. Let's do this. And it's been a remarkable journey, and fits right in with how people are developed, how we connect with people in such a special way. And for me, the love of employee experience, I think Morne's hit it quite nicely in that it is about lifting up a concept that needed to be lifted up. And the employee experience really is about what are those touch points of engagement. And from my IT background, right the way from recruitment to onboarding to learning and development to performance management. And we'll talk about that, I suppose, under the coaching banner, but performance, succession planning. What is that experience like? What is that developmental journey like? And creating that experience of, do I want to stay here? Do I feel like I belong here? And creating a science around that is what I love about that, so that it becomes tangible. And when it becomes tangible, then you can actually pull the different levers and make changes to improve where improvements need to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's obviously the common thread between you of the human experience, and I dare say a slight rebellious streak, which I've, the bashing down the door, the asking for forgiveness later, and maybe we'll touch on that later. But now, I've got a couple of questions, and I know that you're both subject matter experts. So I am going to pose a question and ask one of you to take it and give me an opinion on that. And you can duke it out as to who answers the question. But I think kicking off, coaching, employee experience space, it's everywhere. We're talking about leader as coach. We're looking at the expectations around line managers, where it's in every conversation. And we're saying, how can leaders step up? How can they be intentional about introducing coaching into a business? How do you see this happening? How does it impact the employee experience? Again, that's like 3 questions in one, but who wants to take a run at that?
Yeah, I'm happy to if you want. I think that where you're starting now, and you spoke about managers and leaders, is a really good place to start. And managers have a specific role. And Morne and I were actually having a great discussion around this the other day. And I hope you don't mind, Morne. I'm going to run with this. You can edit this piece out, but I'm going to run with this because it's such a great explanation. So managers are responsible for resources, and they have a task to manage resources, whether it's the desk that you sit at, to the computer that you work on, to the machine that you work on, and they manage those resources. But there is a humanistic element to that role. And this is where the transformation from manager of resources and even human resources, and we call human resources a department of managing resources, and we're not resources, we're human beings.
Yeah.
And when we take people into that world of coaching and we start to coach and we start to give managers the ability to coach, we start to transform the way they engage with their teams, and they start to step into the role of leader. They start to step into the role of being able to transform the lives of the people that report into them. And I often think of Simon Sinek's comment. He says, being a manager is not about being in charge. It's about being responsible for those in your charge.
Yeah.
And it's about changing that mindset and behavior from command and control of resources to having a humanistic conversation, asking questions rather than telling people what to do. So it's a different way of engaging, and it elevates the importance of the people in the team, what we call resources, but elevating the importance of human beings into a relationship where they can feel safe to contribute, where they can feel safe to grow and learn, and they know that their well-being is taken care of through the person that is responsible for them and is leading them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Morne, I mean, when we look at that and we say, you know, people are now, they change in the way that they respond back to this new approach. What are you seeing in that space? How does that impact the way that the employee then no longer sees himself as a resource, but a person who's valued and seen? How does that impact?
Basically, it's the dividing line between compliance and discretionary effort. You know, a lot of environments are compliance driven, and it's totally understandable. We all got a lot of pressure on us, but honestly, people don't thrive in environments where they're asked to comply with the rules and the regulations that are put there. They want to be seen as people.
Yeah.
And when you introduce the human element, when you invite the human into the workplace, what you're inviting is engagement, contribution, a sense of purpose. People understand that they are more than just a battery that will be swapped out once it's depleted, but that there's a development path, that they are valued as a contributor to the organization and not as a resource to the organization to be exploited, extracted, and depleted. And in essence, that changes the way in which they experience their work environments. It changes the way in which people experience their leaders, or it goes from how you experience your managers. I don't know how any of you like to be managed. I don't like to be managed, but I don't mind a good leader. And so it switches them from resources being managed into people that are being led and inspired.
Yeah.
And, you know, that change is actually, it's amazing how that can impact the bottom line. It's amazing how it can impact the strategy and direction of the business or the organization that they are part of. It liberates and unleashes energy. It allows people to invest their attention and their engagement in their workplace because they see it as worthwhile, because it's something that they have a say in, that they can help shape, that they can help drive forward. And so I would say that organizations that are looking at coaching are the organizations, Sally, that they've realized that where the next growth opportunity is. They've realized that a better strategy, more training and more capability isn't actually going to move the needle. That really where the big opportunity lies is creating the kind of culture that enables execution of that strategy, that can wield that capability and make it happen. And that's why they bring coaching in, and where coaching is deployed in the right way. And I need to stress that, in the right way. Because sometimes coaching can be used in the wrong way. And I think that's going to create a little bit of stigma. And we can chat about that a little bit later. But where it's deployed in the right way, with the right intentions, what you unleash is human creativity and effort and energy. And I just think that that's awe-inspiring stuff. And it'll take you to wherever you want to go, because that's the only thing that really ever has. We're here and we're enjoying the kind of world that we live in right now because small groups of human beings got together and unleashed energy and did something special with that. And isn't that really what we're trying to achieve inside of our organizations? So to me, it impacts the employee experience profoundly. The main experience of any person sitting in a team is going to be the person they're reporting to. If that person is transformed into the kind of person that I would want to give my effort to and my loyalty to and make my contribution to, that's entirely different to being disengaged and being in an away state because the person I'm reporting to can't work with people. They're excellent managers. They are competent in moving resources around, but they don't know what moves my heart. And so to me, that's the fundamental where the rubber meets the road in the employee experience equation. It transforms it. So coaching done the right way is very impactful, I think.
I 100% agree. And Joel, I'm interested to hear your perspective. I mean, we're looking here really at the access. I mean, Morne was talking around how you get the discretionary effort, but for me, it's bringing up this idea that we're moving people into growth mindset, and we're teaching people how to recognize their own skills and their own competencies, and allowing them to really also dictate somewhat where they want to go in an organization and where they're seeing a need that potentially they can plug. And I mean, the impact on this in an organization and in a world that's so fraught with change at the moment. I mean, what do you see as the big advantages for businesses there?
So I think if you start moving people from an extrinsic to an intrinsic values, and you start to lift up their ability to feel the reward of contribution internally, they start to feel fulfilled, they start to feel happy. And that's when they start to apply that willingness for discretionary effort. And when companies are engaging with their teams like this, and team leaders are engaging with the individuals in their teams like this, you start to tap into collective intelligence. So 1 + 1 = 3. So now you're creating a space for people to bounce ideas off each other and add on to what other people are saying, because it's okay to put forward an idea that somebody else might enhance because they've got something to add to that. And you're inviting that into the conversation. And as you grow that, the ideas and the innovation and the inspiration start to come into the way that we do things. This becomes part of the culture, this is how we work in this organization. So when companies start to allow that, when they start to see that as a value add to their employee experience of how do we engage internally, internally in our teams, across teams, so how we cross departmentally engaging, and then how we're engaging with customers and that employee experience. And Richard Branson said this beautifully, and he said, if you train your people so well that they won't want to, that they can leave your organization, and then treat them so well that they won't want to, they will then end up looking after your customers. Your priority needs to be your people, not your customers.
Yeah.
And if a CEO is telling you that his priority is bottom line, if his priority is customers, he's not focused in the right place for what people are looking for today. And they're looking for the ability to step into a role and not have to know everything, to be coached and to be brought into the conversations for what they can contribute and learn from their contribution, even learning from mistakes, being allowed to make mistakes and fail forward, so to speak, and be able to grow and thrive in that environment. The company has to benefit from that because people want to stay in environments like that, and talent wants to go and join companies like that. There's some good examples out there of companies that are really using this to the fullest advantage, and people don't want to leave those organizations. They feel like human beings, not like human resources.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, you're talking about safety there. Morne, sorry, over to you.
Yeah. So I wanted to add, tack something onto what Joel just said there, and maybe fully focus on one more concept, is that there is some kind of social contract. It's not explicitly stated, but the social contract between people agreeing to work for an organization, it's a voluntary thing. They choose who they work for. I know that in tough economic times, tight labor markets makes it a little bit more difficult. High unemployment creates certain pressures on people. But in the end, people choose who they want to work for. And part of that social contract, or the agreement that they make with the organization, or the expectation, I think, more and more, is that you're going to develop me. Yeah. The organization is going to develop me. You are going to help me become more than what I am coming into this organization. And if I had two organizations to choose from, to take my skill set to make my contribution to, the one that offers me a pathway to becoming more than who I am coming in, that I can become more skilled, more valuable, more capable, that organization is going to have my attention in the beginning and my loyalty later. And it's my experience while I'm with that company that speaks to the employee experience. But this is decision making before that employee experience, right? And it's to me that's the important part. If a company has taken a coaching culture on board, they're signaling to the people that are making the decision to come and work for them that development is part of your package of what you're going to get back from us in exchange for your contribution. And that might not be reflected on the salary slip, but it counts. It counts huge, because we're living in a day and age where things are changing so fast. All of us realize that we're going to have to carry on learning. We're going to have to be lifelong learners. We're going to have to keep developing until we retire one day. And companies being part of that, companies saying, we've got a coaching culture, we're going to develop you, we're going to develop your capability, we might even develop your leadership inside of our organization. That's very attractive. So in terms of talent acquisition and talent retention, I think that plays an enormous role. And I just wanted to highlight that because Joel touched on it, but I thought it's something worth focusing on a little bit further.
If I may, Sally, I want to add something onto that, because it sparked an idea for me that during my journey of development and working together with people under a coaching culture, in an environment, an enabling environment where my contribution is valued, what happens when I'm starting to think about leaving? I'm coming towards the end of my career. How many times have we had conversations with organizations today to say, people are retiring and all this knowledge is walking out the door, all this information, all this experience is leaving the company when they do, and we're having to start again. If we're creating a coaching culture, we start to share that knowledge and that experience, that information, simply in the way that we're engaging, so that when that person leaves the organization, same way that when I entered the organization, I'm better off leaving, I get to leave the organization better than I found it, by leaving this knowledge and experience within the organization. I suppose, like the All Blacks, I leave the jersey in a better place than I found it as I exit.
Right, and if you've got coaching capability, you're actually nurturing leadership under you. You're developing people. I think that's the point. It's the focus on developing people so that for succession, there are 3 or 4 people that can stick up their hand and make the journey and fill the hole that'll be left if I leave the organization. Now imagine the kind of organization that has that inherently built into their capability. There's 3 or 4 people that can actually step up and do it, and they've been nurtured and they've been developed to be able to take on that role. What happens to that kind of organization, and what kind of capability can they bring to bear on the marketplace and for their customers? I think it's just astonishing stuff.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Sorry, Sally, I'm going to add something else onto that. What an amazing employee! What an amazing employee experience that if I'm in that team and I'm being developed and I'm being coached and
Yeah.
I am on a developmental path, I don't need the promotion to validate my worth in the organization. So I'm part of the team. And if one person rises to lead that team, they didn't do better than me. They just taking on the role of being responsible for me. So it's a different mindset, and I'm not being left behind. I'm being carried forward in that team to better and greater things.
Mm. No, I mean, it's super interesting. And then that actually leads on to what I wanted to say earlier was around, well, two things actually. I do a lot of talks, as you know, on women in the workplace, female empowerment, and we do a lot of talks around this. And one of the big areas that's often missing in an organization when we look specifically at this is women in business development programs are generally aimed at a very specific age group. They're generally considered to be quite the sort of young junior to mid-career entry, and that is where all the development programs are focused on. Now, there's a huge case to be made for the wisdom and coaching ability of women that are returning to the workforce, that are coming back in, or perhaps never left, but had different priorities in their lives for a period of time, and are now coming back in to nurture, to grow, to refocus on their careers, and to add that wisdom back into the organization. Now, for me to come back to an organization or to look at that, a coaching culture where I can bring my experience, my worth to grow and nurture other people, is definitely going to be an organization that I will consider moving to, because they recognize my worth and they have a program where I will be fully utilized, even though I'm perhaps more towards the end of my career in the organization. And from an EVP perspective, or employee value proposition, which is a big amount of the work that Talk does, we look as one of the main pillars that we say you've got to build into your EVP is growth and development. It's not learning and teaching, it's growth and development. And that is looking at the opportunities that organization offers me, as you say, to attract, retain, and involve employees in the organization. And I think that that's such a missed opportunity for so many organizations to say, how am I even attracting people later in their careers that can bring this coaching and this wisdom into my organization? Am I targeting them? Am I trying? I think it's an interesting thought.
I love it, Sally, and you've actually given words to something that I personally haven't considered, because I'm a guy, right? And I love it when I get my brain extended into areas that I don't normally think about. Yeah, Jack Ma, who is a Chinese billionaire, basically made the point that in the first few years, the first quarter of your life, you're learning and you're acquiring skills to be able to enter into the workplace. And for the second quarter of your life, you're fighting and climbing the career path. And for the third quarter of your life, you're actually in a different space where you're trying to create value for the people around you. And as you near the end of your working life, it becomes about growing other people, because your time is finished. And you want to leave this, this whole organization or the world in a better place. And what better way to do it than to grow people that, with your experience, with your life experience, your career experience, everything that you've learned, and hand that over to the next generation of leaders that are coming through. And I think there are a lot of people that want to make that kind of contribution. And what you speak to, the humanist inside me loves what you said. There's a bit of an idealist that just doesn't die inside of me. The world's tried, but it can't manage it. And I think that you're speaking to that sense of leaving a legacy. And that coaching is actually a bit of a pathway to that. If you learn how to coach, you can actually develop people. It's incredibly satisfying. It's wonderful for the people that are being developed. There's just really wins all around. And so it facilitates what it is that you were talking about there, Sally. So thank you for mentioning that. You've given me something to think about.
And I want to ask Joel a question on this, just off the back of this. Joel, do you think that in this example, that it could actually be a bit of an antidote to, of course, and now I've completely imposter syndrome, just completely left my mind. Do you think that by going through coaching and actually being able to recognize in yourself that you have this value to give and impart, and that you can become a coach? Because I mean, I'm again speaking from Women in Business, imposter syndrome comes up the whole time as one of the number one things that women in business have to overcome after cash flow. So it's definitely something. So I mean, do you think this could be a way?
Imposter syndrome is one of those things that is very prevalent, and I don't think it's just in women, but it is very prevalent that there are people that
men just hide it better.
That we don't want to admit it. We're too scared to admit it, right? So that whole idea that if somebody is coaching me and the value of my knowledge, my wisdom, my inspiration, my innovation, if that is being drawn out in conversations and people are saying, thank you for your contribution, how can I ever be an imposter? How can I ever feel like an imposter? And I think that we create imposter syndrome by the way we treat people,
yes,
by the way we treat them as resources, because we don't invite them into the room, into the conversation for what they can contribute. We go and we manage them for their output. And
very narrow.
They sit there with all this knowledge, information going, if you don't think it's valuable, then maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I'm not worth the time to explore. And if I'm coming back into a career later in towards my retirement, and I've got this wealth of knowledge, and you're not sitting there asking me questions about what I think and what I can contribute and how I see things. And if you're not tapping into that, I'm going to sit there and detach and disengage, because if I feel maybe like I'm an imposter, because hey, if I've got all this information, you don't want it, then maybe it's just not valuable.
Yeah.
Now, Joel, you're talking about the discretionary effort there, and what people will withhold because it's not valued, right? And you're not going to know if it's valued unless you have the conversation. And coaching creates the context for the conversation. In fact, it catalyzes the conversation around that. So team leaders get to know about things about their team that they would never have known if they hadn't actively coached these people, and they don't know what the is that people can make. And quite honestly, if you are only being measured on a very narrow range of outputs, and nothing else, is the organization, your leader is interested in nothing. Well, your manager, leaders won't do that, but managers would. Your manager's only interested in this narrow range of output. You get the message that pretty much the rest of your great ideas are not welcome. And I think it would feed into that imposter syndrome, is to say, well, good, I'll do what I do here, and my discretionary effort I'll keep for myself. I'll go get a hobby or start a business part-time or something, but it's not welcome here. And coaching actually counteracts that, Sally. I think you've spotted it. In a way, you're inviting the whole person in. And you're actually saying, what else? What fires you up? What do you want to have happen here? And what are you willing to do to make that happen? That's inviting that discretionary effort in. And I think people are very sure of their own experiences and what they can contribute. So they feel confident when they do that, when they contribute from their own experience, their own mental maps. They know what the expectation is. They know they look at volunteerism. Sorry, I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but there are places where people volunteer. They don't get paid, they volunteer. Yeah. What are those places doing differently to organizations that pay huge amounts of money and get just what is they ask for and nothing more?
Yeah, a little purpose, a little thank you.
Yeah, a little bit of interest. And I guarantee you that the volunteers get asked what they'd like to do. How would you like to make a contribution? Over and above what we need from you, how would you like to make a contribution? And the organization is interested in receiving that contribution and creating a platform for that to be actualized. So I guess coaching feeds into this whole picture in that way. Coaching is inviting that kind of contribution into the workplace.
I've never thought about it like that before, but that is a really great point. I will be using it. I'm not paying you commission. I'm putting
That's
that on
okay.
there. But no,
I
that's
blame you for these wonderful thoughts we're having.
So Joel, off the back of that then, how do you think this impacts like a culture of people speaking up, not only from sharing ideas, but also creating a little bit more transparency in an organization?
You're talking about psychological safety here, really, and the different aspects of psychological safety, where if you're coaching individuals and you're performance coaching them, not performance managing them, right? So there's a different concept here, and you're coaching them for high performance. And part of that coaching is, tell me your struggles. Part of that coaching is, how would you like to do this? And be given the space to completely fail, to go, oh, okay, that doesn't work, right? People are going to start volunteering in those terms, going to start volunteering their ideas and their willingness to engage. And it's interesting from a neuroscience perspective, the brain actually you start to use different parts of the brain when this happens. So in that command and control, performance management kind of KPI, the brain is typically sitting using mostly the limbic brain, and it's in this away state and needs are not being met. But if you get somebody to engage and you get them to feel the rewards of dopamine or whatever the chemical is that happens, and they start to feel those rewards of engagement, then yes, absolutely, this is what starts to happen. You have to feel like I'm valued for this, and you have to feel like this is worth the risk of putting my hand up to say, I want to contribute. I want to challenge leadership and say, I think there's a better way of doing this without being shut down or shot down in flames for challenging the status quo, so to speak. That's invited, that the behavior and the mindset is different. I think you spoke about this earlier. It's about a growth mindset, and it's about emotional intelligence to be able to, hey, something's not sitting right with me here, right? This is what I'm feeling. This is what's happening for me. Maybe we can innovate a better way of doing this. Work with me here. Here's some ideas. Let's throw them around. And people are not sitting there judging and condemning, oh, because somebody dared to speak up or somebody dared to speak out. That it's a psychologically safe space to be able to contribute and learn and grow.
Yeah, but it also creates feedback loops, Sally.
Mm.
So leaders, and I'm going to use the leader, I'm not going to say managers, leaders that are coaching their teams know what's happening in that team. They know how people are thinking and feeling about the organization, about their work. In fact, you don't have to survey your people. Your team leader knows what's going on inside of that
100%.
team. So coaching creates the forum or the platform for that. It creates an intentional space to get that kind of feedback too. And so the organization is much more sensitive and finely tuned to the employee experience as it's happening in real time than a survey conducted every 6 months or 12 months later.
Ooh, don't get me started.
So
what a beautiful document. Love it.
Yeah, so it puts team leaders in touch with their teams, and they can feed that back up to the top structures of the organization. And especially if there's a coaching culture that's been established from the top down, it means that kind of feedback is welcomed, it's acted upon, and the organization can pivot quickly where they realize that they might be making a mistake and actually putting some of their people into an away state. And HR might be able to tell you what it'll cost the organization in terms of money, pure monetary terms of the salaries of the people that are disengaged, versus having those people actually engaged and giving, contributing, and producing effort on behalf of the company. That's something that is very hard to quantify. We don't normally go through the trouble of quantifying that, but you can ask yourself, what is the cost of not coaching in an organization and enabling that kind of feedback system? If for every employee that is disengaged, what are you losing?
Yeah, we're going to have to come up with a new metric of value of lost potential. We'll call it VOLP. And that, but I mean, really, you employ someone based off yes, they meet a need, but ultimately you're employing them for their potential. And to have all that unrealized potential sitting in your business, I mean, honestly, that should actually be on a balance sheet. Because really that is a huge amount of money that you're investing that you're not seeing return on. But now, before we go down that road, I'm going to ask you, Morne, we've talked a lot about coaching and, the positive side of it, but for a lot of organizations, coaching's got a little bit of a stigma attached to it, or a bit of a bad rep in some places. What are your thoughts around that?
I think it might be justified, to be honest with you, and it's got to do with the way in which coaching is used. So from an external perspective, if you're using external coaches exclusively to come and consult to the organization, they're expensive. They are not cheap. And it's an unsustainable effort. And you might be able to put it up for a few months at most, but after a while, it's going to run out of steam. And you would have paid a lot of money, invested a lot of money in that. So I think that there's a certain amount of a stigma around using external coaches and the cost factor involved, and the fact that because it's a high cost, it can only be a targeted thing for executive teams and top-end managers. So it tends to be something that's only deployed for a certain number of people. And we love it when the top guys get certain privileges and we don't, right?
Everyone loves that. Yeah, best.
So I see that as being something. It's seen a little bit elitist, but it's a cost structure issue, having this external, being reliant on an external expertise, consultants really, to come and coach inside of your organization. That's one aspect. So it makes sense for organizations to actually turn this into an internal capability, to actually learn to teach their managers how to coach so that they can turn them into leaders, number one. But number two, it's an internal capability that can be deployed as and when it's needed anytime, in real time. And so you're bringing the benefits of coaching not to your executive C-suite, but you're giving it to the entire organization, and it becomes developmental. Leaders have developmental relationships with their team members, and they're capable of developing and leading people. So you can imagine how that ignites and starts realizing some of that untapped potential. And I love that metric that you gave. But really to try and realize some of that potential that's being lost, this is the way to do it. Bring it in as an internal capability. The problem, though, is in some cases, HR are the only people that know how to coach. And where you've got certain HR professionals, really, many times their job is to actually get some kind of performance improvement out of people, and coaching skills will be deployed as a performance management, as a part of performance management. Now, that is a threatening environment in which to deploy coaching. In fact, if you're doing it as a last resort, you're doing it wrong. Coaching should have been done way before then. People should have been developed and supported in that development to grow their capabilities so that you're not having to performance manage them later. Yeah. In fact, you're just saying thank you to them for the wonderful performance that they're delivering. And so I think that we're in the hands of HR, and I can understand HR professionals, needing the coaching skill set and using it, but the circumstances in which they're asked to deploy that skill set sometimes is the wrong place to be using coaching. So it's used as a remedial performance management measure instead of its wonderful intention, which is actually developmental. If you use it in a developmental context, people get the full benefit, and the organization starts realizing the full benefit over the whole employee's time at the organization. And so you're realizing more of that lost potential over time. So I say that organizations should use it in a developmental way, and they should be doing it from the word go, not just using it as a remedial final intervention for performance management where things have gone wrong.
And it's got to kind of, you kind of start having a bit of a Yoda thing going on there, where you're kind of like, use the force for good, Luke, But I hear, I mean, then that is where it comes from. And Joel, moving, you and I think formed our relationship over the idea of this, democratization of coaching at scale. So not an easy question for you, but how do companies get started? I mean, how do you start to build this this culture of learning? How do you start to develop it? How do you do it at scale?
Simple question. It's really easy. Yeah. Sally, it's a really good question. And the idea that if we are going to make a change like this in an organization, there needs to be a willingness from top leadership, that there needs to be a buy-in from top leadership. And we've seen what happens if we coach into a middle management layer. They enjoy the experience, and the people reporting to them love being coached. But
Okay.
the people they're reporting to are still of the old command and control style management. And they're going, oh, what the hell's going on here? I'm treating my people and I've become like a barrier so that upper management can't access my people. And I'm trying to play this defensive role here because this is not a culture in the organization. So culture needs to be, and it should be pervasive within an organization. And getting the buy-in of C-suite, of CEOs, can be tricky because it does have potentially a bad rap because they're paying X amount to be coached externally, and they go, oh no, we can't afford this for the organization. Can't have everybody being coached. So there's an education process that needs to happen, and doing podcasts like this and educating out there to say a coaching culture is not about creating coaches. This is not about developing fully fledged International Coaching Federation certified coaches.
Sure,
This is about leadership development. This is about leadership skills. And if you want to create a coaching culture, what you're doing is really, and I'm just suddenly sparked on this, we're not creating a coaching culture. We're creating a leadership culture rather than a management culture. And so we're transforming the culture from management to leadership. And if we're talking about that, and we're talking about how this engages discretionary effort, how this starts to move performance and productivity needles, because that's what the CEO is concerned about, is what's the bottom line, right? So if we can showcase how this starts to move those needles and how this starts to encourage people to want to stay, that we have stay interviews rather than exit interviews as part of our culture, then we start to see the costs that we're saving for recruitment. We start to see the what VOLP, the volt, right? We start to see that needle move in the right direction, because now we're starting to see a value chain and an employee experience that starts to speak back to strategy, that starts to speak to enabling strategy. The skills are there. We know that the organizations have got skills. They employ people because they submit their CVs and they can see, oh, you've got all these skills, right? There's strategy. Leaders know how to develop strategy. They know how to execute strategy, but actually carrying out that strategy requires culture. And Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And this is where that really starts to, the techie really hits the road, right? Because without that culture of leadership, enabling and carrying out and running with a strategy, people are sitting there going, why would I add discretionary effort? Why would I go beyond the call of my skill set in this organization? So teaching, educating, speaking to CEOs about that impact that it has, that this is not about even about coaching, this is about leadership culture, changing that narrative so that they're seeing how creating a leadership culture will impact their bottom line, I think is part of that journey that we're on. And that's the conversation. Those are the conversations we're having.
Morne, to finish us off and round off for the day, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I would. There's got to be a pathway, an achievable pathway to adopting a coaching culture. No one in their right mind is going to commit to something that they can't see is achievable. But sometimes we do, and we can achieve it because we build the plane on the fly. But those are not the kind of actions that CEOs get rewarded for by their shareholders. So I think the thing is that there's got to be a clear pathway, an achievable one. And I think I think we brought it full circle here, Sally. You know, the coaching culture's offering, the coaching culture platform, it's a digital platform. It does a huge amount of heavy lifting in terms of bringing the skill set into the organization and being to train up people so that they can have better conversations and make the switch to become coaches in many of the conversations that they have inside of their teams and inside of their workplace. So the platform's digital. It allows organizations to achieve this kind of rollout at speed, at scale, to do it affordably and to do it sustainably. And then because the central platform is doing the heavy lifting of providing some kind of platform on which the organization can make all of this happen, the other interventions then that are about moving people and getting people to adopt this new kind of culture, this new way of looking at things, they can be more targeted, much more contained, affordable because it's more targeted. It's not just this spray and pray kind of approach. And so what you find is that the success rate also climbs. The ability to make the conversion, to make the jump happen from point A to point B. So the platform plays a critical role in doing that and doing it at scale. Organizations do need to have this to happen at scale, and you need strategies to support that kind of rollout at scale, which I think is what Coaching Culture has done really well, and what LRMG, now that they're taking Coaching Culture into the marketplace, they're signaling to their clients that this kind of capability is something that can get them there. And I believe that it can. It has in the past. There's some wonderful, successful projects, case studies, wonderful track record. And I think that, I think it's a winning strategy. I think it's a question of really finding those companies that have had enough and realize that they need to move the needle on the culture side and move to a leadership culture instead of a management and compliance culture, and that want to take that leap. And I think that they'll find the right partner in looking at LRMG for working with them.
So if you want to develop leaders in your organization, I guess Joel is your man then, and the right person to contact. Joel, you happy? I'm going to pop your details here for everybody to reach out to you if they've got some more questions or want to see some of those case studies Morne was mentioning. Is that good?
Absolutely. It would be my privilege to engage with anybody who wants to have a conversation.
And as
good. Joel likes coffee,
fun.
So as long as coffee is involved, he'll do it. It's not a problem.
We'll work for coffee. I get that. At a soul level, I get that. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Morne, I know it's very late where you are. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Joel, always such a pleasure. Thank you for joining me on the Future of Employee Experience.
Oh, thank you, Sally. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, excellent. Brilliant.
All right, I'm going to stop recording.
We bounce off each other beautifully. I can't imagine if you locked us up in a Teams call for a day, what the hell would come out the back